Well, I hope this is working. The camera and mic's a bit funny at the moment. Don't know why. But quick video. I don't want it to go on too long. Uh, it's about this thing that's trending on social media about people like Dr. John Campbell, he's called John of Carlisle on Twitter, I think. But he's one of these guys back in 2020 pushing certain medical interventions, emergency authorised interventions, saying they were safe and effective and all this sort of stuff. And subsequently, 4 years later, now doing a 180 degrees turn. He recently had a guest on a couple of days ago, a psychologist from Australia, talking about how unethical it was, the use of applied psychology during the 2020 incident that occurred in the world globally. And one of the reasons she gave in the video, which I thought was ridiculous, she said that a lot of the people in these nudge units, SPY, Be of Sage, Behavioural Insights team, and the other similar units in other places of the world, they were young and naive. Now, well, they certainly weren't. Maybe some were youngish. Susan Mitchie from Spy Be's not a young lady. No disrespect to her age. And other people on Spy Be of Sage are women and men, gentlemen, and they're not spring chickens. The thing is, right, on social media, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, we shouldn't criticise these people who've done 180s, like Dr. John Campbell and other people." Well, okay, right. It's great. It's fantastic that they admit that certain things have went wrong. Fine, that's fair enough. I've got no problem with saying truths. There's truths there. Things have went wrong. However, there is a big question mark. For example, the woman on Dr. John Campbell's channel the other day saying that psychologists were young and naive, echoes someone like Laura Dodsworth, who wrote the book State of Fear, who interviewed psychologists of Spy B, and they were kind of realising maybe the things they had pushed into the population, the sort of restrictive measures that were imposed upon people in 2020 for that incident that incident they were kind of humming and hawing and kind of had reservations of perhaps what they did. Well, let's just put this to bed today, okay? First year undergraduate psychology, you get research methods and ethics. Okay? You know exactly what the ethics are of applied psychology and in research and informed consent. 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds out of school get schooled straight away, warning them, if you're going to be a psychologist and you're going to do things in the world with people, there's certain things you can't do because it's harmful. So naivety in being young is no excuse. Now, in the British, I'm getting a bit, this is 2024. I said these things back in 2020. So I'm getting a lot, it's not almost half a decade when you think about it. This is the professional standards of psychologists in the UK from the British Psychological Society. The tactics of the Spy B psychologists who are informing the UK and the Scottish Government's policies on the COVID-19 response are contrary to ethical and practice guidelines of the British Psychological Society. This is the psychological equivalent of the Hippocratic Oath for medicine and similar things for nursing. So all these medical people have been instructed in ethics in their domain of a very similar nature. Same, do no harm. There's no real excuse. Now, from the British Psychological Society Code of Ethics and Conduct document, Statement of Values 3.1, psychologists value the dignity and worth of all persons, with sensitivity to the dynamics of perceived authority and or influence over persons and peoples, and with particular regard to people's rights. Now, perceived authority. When Nicola Sturgeon stood up on a podium and shamed people for not getting certain treatment and called them selfish and irresponsible, that was a instance of coercion. She was in the prime position of authority. None of the psychologists said anything about people like her, Chris Whitty, Boris Johnson, and all these celebrities on these mainstream news channels telling people that they should be excluded from society for not getting certain treatment. None of them said that this was irresponsible. It was coercion. So, in applying these values, psychologists consider privacy and confidentiality, well, privacy for your medical records, privacy for your treatments that you're getting, track and trace, the vaccine passports. They have to consider issues of power and consent and self-determination. The importance of compassionate care, including empathy, sympathy, generosity, openness, distress tolerance, commitment and courage. Now, it goes on. I don't have to explain what I've just said. Apply it to what the restrictions were. It violated these things that I've just read out. It's violated them. And when the spy bees were sitting round the table discussing this, you didn't think they knew that it was wrong? What was happening in society? People being stopped working, people being stopped seeing each other, funerals stopped, gatherings stopped. They knew exactly, and so did the politicians. Now, safeguarding. Safeguarding, this is from the British Psychological Society Practice Guidelines document. Safeguarding means protecting people's health, well-being and human rights. Think restrictions. I'm getting tired of explaining it. And enabling them to live free from harm, abuse and neglect. Safe and effective. Messages have been put out in social media. It's part of the applied psychological tactics, which were misleading. It's quite incredible. Mariana Spring never picked up on these finer points. I suppose that explains why I've been blocked. Interestingly, I criticised the psychologists that Laura Dodsworth interviewed in their book, saying that the narrative they were putting out that we kind of realised later on it was maybe a bit dodgy. I said, well, that's impossible, because most of these people who had positions in universities, they knew what ethics were. They went through ethics committees. They probably sat on ethics committees. They knew the limits of what you can and can't do. And I pointed out that they were being disingenuous in her book. I think it was to put a narrative of the poor psychologist who didn't really know what we were doing. They knew exactly what was happening. But anyways, the categories abuse takes many forms and cuts through various domains of life. The categories below are often referred to in investigation legislation context and are not mutually exclusive, e.g. emotional abuse featuring in other domains of abuse. Abuse can be found across all sections of society, irrelevant of gender, age, ability, religion, race, ethnicity, blah, 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 right? So, psychological or emotional abuse is behaviour that is psychologically harmful or inflicts mental distress by threat, humiliation, and or non-verbal conduct. Selfish and irresponsible. Nicola Sturgeon is psychological abuse. Psychological abuse is a crime in Scotland. And I think he should go to jail for what he did. Because it was emergency authorised. People are should be free to define what their medical treatment and intervention should be. It shouldn't be under scrutiny from the state. That's coercion. Under the Nuremberg Code, that's you've just crossed the line. And from the psychological standards. Financial abuse is the actual or attempted theft, fraud, or burglary. It's the misappropriation or misuse of money, property, benefits, material goods, or other asset transactions, which the person could consent to, and were invalidated by intimidation, coercion, or deception, shutting people's businesses. People who opened their businesses will shut them down. This is financial abuse. Institutional abuse. Oh, it goes on and on. You know, I get tired. I'm frankly, you know, I don't know if I mentioned it, but when I pointed out in Laura Dodsworth's book that the psychologists were disingenuous, this was at the same time that she was criticising Bob Moran for cartoons, reporting them to the police, or, you know, alluding to in Twitter that, and copying in the police and the whatever, that this was disgraceful cartoons. I was blocked. I've never interacted with Laura Dodsworth, but it's just it makes things very interesting, doesn't it? Uh, so what else was I wanting to say? There's another thing. The way back in April 2020, or beginning of May, Susan Mitchell of Spy B gave a webinar at the British Psychological Society talking about the pandemic, and they were talking about the no return to normal, that this was the brave new normal. But also earlier, must have been in April 2020, and it was, and sometime in April, there was a meeting in the Houses of Parliament, you know, one of these meetings in the government area, talking about immunity passports. It was never just 2 or 3 weeks to flatten the curve. So why were they talking about immunity passports in April 2020? You see, this is the disingenuousness going on. Any psychologist worth their salt, all need to do is look at Biderman's table of coercion, which was developed out of research with prisoners of war. So stopping people work, stopping people meet, isolation, etc., are all regarded as abuse and coercive abuse under Biderman's table of coercion. As I said, the psychologist of Spy B must have known. Catherine Scott of Spy B of Sage, no relation. was on Spy B, and she's very high up in the British Psychological Society. Ethics committees are extremely strict in academia, so it's not possible that psychologists did not know that these restrictions in advertisements and fear-mongering were unethical and contra their code of conduct. Now, the same things are in place for medicine and nursing, as I said. So people like Dr. David Campbell, John Campbell, and other people, these got huge followings on Twitter and on YouTube, who discussed safe and effective, discussed get the job, all this sort of stuff. And then coming out now with, got it wrong. Not questioning these life-changing restrictions on people's lives and the coercion in their code of conduct as well. It's quite clear. It's quite clear. They can't turn around and say, we just went along with it. In the latest video with John Campbell and this psychologist, it's like they make out that people who are securely attached, who haven't had trauma in their life, didn't realise anything bad was going on because they kind of went over their heads. It's bullshit. It is utter bullshit. So, forgive me when someone messages me on Twitter and says, you're being divisive by pointing out he's done a 180. At least he's come round now. The big question is, first of all, I'm glad people are coming out and saying the truth. Carry on saying the truth. Yeah. At least the questions have got to be answered. Why did you ignore your ethical training? The nursing ethics, the medical ethics, the psychological ethics. Why suddenly had such a forgetfulness? Did the mind go blank? Was there mind control weapons targeting your brain at the time, 2020, which made you forget all your training, all your ethical training? I don't buy it. So when Disease X comes along, which we've been assured it will, Bill Gates mentioned it way back, and then it will notice the next one. We'll really notice the next one, especially when the WHO treaty's in place. We'll notice it because we can't do anything about it. We'll have to go along with all these rules and regulations. Will the forgetfulness come in again, I wonder? So, divisive. It's divisive to point out ethics. Ethics doesn't change from 2020 to 2024. Ethical standards have stayed exactly the same. Anyone who says different, or anyone who says, you're just being divisive, no. I'm not divisive. One is speaking uncomfortable truths. The uncomfortable truth is that people that conveniently forgot their ethics. Now, I can have some sympathy for some people for being scared of losing their job, losing their reputation, being seduced to collude in this. You look at the Milgram prison experiment and the Stanford prison experiment, the Milgram electrical shock experiment. People can be coerced and convinced to inflict harm and start playing the Nazi prison guard. Now, I think that's happened to a lot of people. People went along with it. Human nature's quite dark, and it's not been divisive to say that what we've noticed in 2020 to now is human nature is extremely dark. There's a lot of dark people out there who've done a lot of dark things. I would respect one of these people who've done a 180 to come out and say, you know what? I was scared. I was frightened. You know, kind of like a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. They said that'd be good. That would be good to say we were frightened. I'm frightened about losing my job. I just went along with it. I feel ashamed. You know, that'd be very helpful. I think that would heal any division. That would heal a lot of division. But the playing dumb, oh, I didn't know what was going on. I kind of lost for, kind of went into stupor. I didn't really know my mind. No, 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 no. I don't buy that at all. You know, maybe a small percentage, it shows that a lot of people shouldn't be in these positions of, I mean, a doctor, nurse, psychologist, etc. If they're not mentally strong enough to have discernment, on these issues. I mean, people get into positions in for the status of jobs, the power that they have. You know, the cultural Marxists will attest to that. This power dynamics. Well, well, but of course, the cultural Marxists have been extremely silent on the power dynamics that are relevant to this issue. A lot of these people pushing restrictions uh, and making people go along with them. Where's all the power dynamic analysis there? It's not there. Because, of course, even cultural Marxists can be seduced by power, which is something they forget. But 22 minutes I've been ranting, but my articles are on UK Column website. I've also got another big article on my Borderline website. I've also got my uh, testimony to the German Corona Investigative Committee, which was a couple of years ago now, a year ago, 2 years ago, I can't remember. But I pointed out there, I think, as I recall, back in communist East Germany, under the Stasi regime, Zertestung, which is decomposition of personality, similar methods of psychological manipulation were used, and they're still used today in the globally, actually. People should look into that. Stasi style policing. But uh, when the wall came down, it came out that the psychological abuse had occurred, and human rights organisations and psychology organisations deemed they should never happen again. Well, it has happened again, but the human rights organisations and the psychological organisations and psychotherapy organisations have been silent and or complicit. We live in a highly unethical time where adherence to ethics and a good way of acting, a legal way of acting it's lawlessness. So when people are getting angry and then they're getting called up that they're being divisive, there's some bad things happening, and people have a right to be angry. I certainly, as someone who went through a psychology training, I'm ashamed of what is the psychology profession. Ashamed. And the psychotherapy organisations, charities, mental health charities, who sat back and said nothing. You know, prosecutions were made after the fall of the wall in Berlin. in East Germany, when the wall came down, prosecutions were made. I think the playing dumb could be fear that something could come down the line where they're prosecuted. But you certainly have to be careful and use discernment who you trust in this world. And you have to say, well, do you trust someone who is obviously, for some reason, not mentioning the word ethics? You certainly have to be very, very wary. Playing this, I'm dumb, I was carried away, I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know what was going on. I just ignored it's emergency authorised. Yeah. Dr. John Campbell underlining things and looking troubled 4 years later after he was advocating mandatory jabs or discussing it in a kind of positive sense. No. That's all I'm going to say in it. I hope I don't have to return to this, but I will probably. But anyways, that's it.